Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining the PR Pace podcast. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest shifts happening in media relations right now, the intersection of PR, AI, and visibility. My guest is Brett Farmiloe, the founder and CEO of Featured and the entrepreneur behind the acquisition and relaunch of Help a Reporter Out, which we all know as HARO. Brett has been at the center of how journalists and publicists connect for years, and now he's building what he calls the first true AI for PR platform, essentially a ChatGPT for PR. In this episode, we're going to get into what happened at HARO, why journalist request platforms are evolving, and what AI generated pitching means for the future of earned media. Welcome to the podcast, Brett.
Thanks for having me.
So you've had a front row seat to the evolution of media relations over the last several years. I have too. So before we get into what's next for us publicists, I am sure my diehard PR professionals are really wondering about HARO, and maybe you can just walk us through like what happened to it, why you decided to acquire it, and what's the vision for the platform now? It's been around for so long, and it's something that a lot of us out there really rely on.
Yeah, so a little backstory with HARO, founded in 2008, was acquired in 2010, and it ran for 14 years until April of 24 when it was brought into a platform and rebranded as Connectively. Connectively got shut down or discontinued at the end of 2024. We saw that news and reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested in selling HARO?" And Connectively, and we acquired both. We brought HARO back in April 2025, and its original same 3 times a day email newsletter format that connects journalists with sources for stories, and it's been rocking. It is my favorite brand that I've got just because it's got nostalgia in every PR and journalist's heart. And the intention long term is just to keep it exactly the same. Like it is a perfect product in terms of product market fit, where people love getting those emails. They open them every day. They respond to stuff that's relevant. And our job as the owner and operator is to ensure that quality and trust remains central to the platform. So there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we do to make sure that those connections between journalists and sources are authentic and helpful. But long term, it's just going to be the boring, same old HARO that people rely on.
Well, boring is not exactly a word I would use to describe it. Reliable, useful would be a couple of different ways I would categorize it. But tell us about your background because obviously, like acquiring a platform is probably something that many of my listeners have not experienced personally themselves, but there's a lot of M&A talks and activity in our sector right now. So just curious about your background and sort of how that dovetails into, PR, but then also the business side of it and your acquisitions.
Yeah, so I actually started my career as a financial auditor, then launched a career education website that was acquired. Went to go work for the acquirer for a number of years before breaking out and launching my own marketing agency. And that was by accident. I got my website to rank on page 1 of Google for the term digital marketing company and started a digital marketing company and ran that for 10 years, servicing primarily small businesses with their search engine optimization needs, and then ended up selling that agency at the end of 2021 to focus full time on featured.com. So, this is my fourth business that I've started up. One was kind of an acqui-hire, one failed miserably, one got acquired, and then hopefully, there's a good outcome for what we're working on now.
So how, like, do you feel like the market is oversaturated because there are more than a few platforms that are similar to HARO, journalist request platforms? Do you think it's too saturated, the market? And how do you feel like HARO fits into that dynamic, and like kind of separates itself from some of the others out there?
Here's what I've learned from talking with PR professionals is that they will go where the leads are. And and I think that they should subscribe to as many different platforms as they can to get those opportunities that are right for their clients. So that's why you're seeing probably more platforms spring up and I think that there's still opportunities to do so. It just gets at some point, like you said, saturated. It gets confusing and too much to monitor and too much to maintain for a standard solo practitioner. So I think that, from what we're seeing, I always say, go subscribe to our competitors, go subscribe to HARO, subscribe to Connectively, because you need to be in front of where those opportunities actually are.
And so where do you think the opportunity is for you to make money on a platform like that? Because I keep getting targeted and hearing about various like browser extensions that are AI powered that have the capacity to provide up to date journalist and media databases. I'm not sure about journalist requests right now. But what's your sense there? I think like a lot of us in the industry are feeling at times a bit overwhelmed because there's so many different types of platforms and databases that we could be subscribing to. So just wondering if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that, back to the saturation point, I think it's just going to become even more saturated because it's easier than ever to build and launch products. So I think that this also bodes really well for PR because the more saturation there is, the more products and brands that are looking for visibility, the more PR is needed to rise above that to get connected with customers. But I think that in terms of the PR practitioner, and thinking about all the tools and services that are available, I think it goes back to the problems of what does the PR professional face? And you mentioned out of date data as one. That's one that I've heard pretty frequently. But for us, I think that the problems that we've heard time and time again is not enough opportunities to get my client featured, and then not enough time to do all of the monitoring of because every PR person subscribed to like their journalist database, their podcast pitching mechanism, their favorite journalist request platform, their second favorite journalist request platform, Substacks. It's a lot to subscribe to. So how do you really combat the time issue that a lot of PR professionals are facing? And I think those are the core problems to solve.
Is which leads me into my next question. Is that the track you're thinking about for the Chat GPT for PR? Because like it gets hard when when you're somebody like myself who every morning before I even wake up, I have like 15 emails from different newsletters I subscribe to, right? And my alerts from monitoring from different platforms. And then the journalist request emails start coming in. And it makes it so hard to do work beyond that sort of like monitoring aspect on a daily basis. And so, can you tell us a little bit about what you're building?
Yeah, definitely. So Featured is a co-pilot for PR. And exactly what you're experiencing, where you've got 15 different emails in your inbox before you even start work. What if you just had one? What if you had a unified platform that monitored across podcasts, journalists, journalist requests, speaking opportunities, byline article opportunities, all of these different things? If you had a co-pilot that monitored all of those different opportunities and we're able to surface the relevant ones and then be able to take actions to give you a starting point. That's essentially a lot of the manual work that's being done today that AI could actually really assist professionals with. So that's, I think, where we're moving towards as an industry is being able to leverage AI as a thinking assistant and monitor, and more importantly, a co-pilot to make it so that PR professionals can focus on stuff like relationships, strategy, and taking the actions to get their clients featured.
Love it. How are you marketing yourself? Like, how are you finding PR professionals? Podcasts like this, I bet, but is it challenging to get in front of folks like myself because there is so much going on in the sales funnel out there that's being put in front of all of us.
Well, our go-to-market is we own HARO. So, almost every PR professional that I know is subscribed to HARO. So, And HARO's a newsletter ad supported product. So we've got a lot of newsletter ads that are going out. And, I think that over time, it's also a really close-knit community. Like when someone finds something that works, they tell their peers. So I think that that's the name of the game for any product builder is build a product that solves a problem and people will share it.
So let's talk about the feedback you're getting from the journalists who utilize HARO and featured. A big point of contention and debate is the use of AI, obviously, not just in our industry, in every industry out there. What is the real feedback from journalists on how much or they hate the use of AI in pitches, or maybe that's not true?
Yeah, I think that there's a divide on both sides. There's real fatigue from AI pitches because there's tools that enable more and more AI pitching, and there's no human in the loop, and that spams inboxes, and that's not good for either side. We're seeing a divide of journalists where some, and I would say probably the majority, are opting out of AI pitches entirely. So on HARO and Featured and Connectively. We run every pitch through an AI detection, and anything that's flagged as 100%, a journalist has an option to withhold that message from their inbox. So we're seeing about 35% of those journalists opt out from those 100% AI pitches entirely. But the interesting thing is, I speak with journalists who actually don't care that some pitches are written by AI, and they don't care because their goal is to get connected with the right source. And if AI gets them connected with the right source, then the next logical step is, okay, let me line up an interview. Let me talk with this person about the story that I'm writing, and then let me get what I need to keep moving forward. So in that sense, AI is being embraced as this incredible connector. And the people that use it right for matching and monitoring, I think that's where the opportunity is. But right now, it's still early in terms of trying to figure out how it's being used. And I think there's a lot of mistakes being made, and journalists are pretty vocal about when those mistakes are being made in their inbox.
Yeah, I mean, I heard and I agree with everything you said. We host a lot of lunch and learns from journalists, just in a continual effort to keep educating ourselves from the journalist and media and producer perspective as all of this is evolving and changing in our industry. And it really is a mixed bag of like, if some journalists absolutely hate it, and some are like, you know what, if the pitch is in my lane and it's something that's interesting, like I'm still going to be interested in it,
Totally.
even, and I think like, where I feel like there's a hard line is when you're pitching an authored piece, like an op-ed or a contributed article. I think the use of AI should be extremely minimal and then only in the editing stage of it, because as of right now, I don't know what you're hearing or seeing out there, but it feels like the AI detecting platforms are also not getting it right half of the time.
Yeah, it gets harder and harder with each model release because these model builders are getting better and better. So AI detection as a whole, I think, is very challenging and very like alienating. Everyone's got, their own AI detector that they're like, well, this is right. And sometimes you see a battle of AI detection tools go out, and I don't think that's a great use of time for really anyone. I think that AI detection tools as a score and a metric should be a signal, but not the ultimate determinant. So, at HARO, it's like, okay, great. When we see AI detection come through, it's a signal for our team to look at it. Like there needs to be a human in the loop no
Yep.
matter what. And so I think that that's been a really important decision that we've made. Yes, it puts more, manual review time from our team to make sure that quality and trust keep moving forward with HARO. But it's a necessary ingredient.
I agree with you, obviously, on that. And sort of then just going back to something you said earlier about how you landed on the first page of Google, and that's kind of part of what blew you up. And obviously, in the before times, that was known as SEO. Now, GEO is the buzziest of all buzzwords in PR at the moment. What have you learned, seen, or can offer as advice for how PR teams should be thinking about AI visibility, different from traditional media coverage or previous SEO strategies?
It's so cool. It's such a fun time. Like you look at GEO and AI visibility and look at the new front page of the internet, and now it's, not search results, it's your favorite AI model and LLM. So I think that, like, I don't have the answers. I think that there's a couple different things that I've seen that shape things pretty well from a PR perspective. One is just press releases. Like, I'm super surprised to see how quickly a solid press release can inform LLMs on what your brand is and what it's about. So I think that that's a secret weapon. I'm also seeing, earned media just as a whole getting mentions on some of these trusted platforms that either have relationships directly with LLMs or don't. Those earned media mentions are a huge factor, it seems like, in getting AI visibility. So over the last couple of years, like, we've seen a dramatic rise in adoption of featured of Help a Reporter Out, because more and more people want to get these earned media mentions. And then the third piece, I think, is just looking at existing citations and looking at, like, if you do a GEO audit, which the featured.com now has, you can basically say, hey, like, what kind of visibility do I have for this particular prompt? And you could look at all the different citations that do get visibility on those LLMs. You could do some outreach. Like, you could correct articles. Like, for us, we just brought back Connectively, and half the internet is saying Connectively is dead. So it's like, reach out to all of those people to be like, hey, we have an update for you. Here's the correct information. Would you mind updating your article? So if it's already being cited and then there's an update to that piece, that's another great way to get visibility.
Totally. Absolutely agree with you there. And when you say press releases, though, I've obviously heard this a bunch of times. Do you know if the press release needs to be placed on PR Newswire, or is it the same searchability or whatever that for the LLMs if the press release is on the client's website in like their news section?
I find so we just announced 2 days ago that we brought Connectively back, and we sent out a press release, and we did not use PR Newswire. We used another service, and it got placed on AP News, on Yahoo, and Business Insider, and then a few other different spots. I ran a test the next day. Perplexity and other LLMs had updated that information based off that press release. So we were able to not use PR Newswire, but when we announce featured as the co-pilot for PR next week, we are going to use PR Newswire, and we'll have a good A/B test for that. So I think that, generally speaking, if you're landing your press release on authoritative outlets, then you need to choose a newswire that, can land you there. I don't think that your blog, your company blog, is going to be, it's a necessary ingredient, but I don't know if it'll have the immediate in like immediate being ingested in terms of these LLMs.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, I am going to definitely dig deeper into featured, and good luck on your launch next week. Thank you for making the time to come on the podcast today. Please tell our listeners how they can reach out to you and learn more. Featured is featured.com, but how can they reach out to you if they want to have a conversation?
Yeah, I'm available on LinkedIn, and like you said, feature.com is launching next week as the co-pilot for PR. We've got Help a Reporter Out and connectively.us that is now back and functioning as HARO and a platform. So if you don't want emails every day, then Connectively is your spot. So, and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much.